On the onset of Splattercast being created, I never really thought that I would go down a path where I primarily cover twisted, brutal, and disturbing films, but if the most recent high-viewed, high-performing videos on this channel have told me anything, it is that that's exactly what you guys are looking for, and yeah, I'm more than happy to oblige. So yeah, if I have to go down the route of a Spooky Rice or a Mr. Gigi, I will happily do that. Not saying that my videos are anything of that quality or anything of that just yet. I'm still learning. You know, as long as I can maybe get my facts straight every once in a while and not claim that Peter Jackson's first film was Dead Alive when he made 2 more movies before that. I don't know, guys. I was confident about that one. I thought I knew better, but I got it. I know. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. I'm sorry. Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and welcome back to my first list to experience a part 2. And yes, we are of course discussing 5 more of the most brutal horror movies you need to watch. Yes, this video was wildly successful. Like I said in my little opening there, you guys absolutely seem to love when I talk about the brutal stuff, the gross stuff, and the most disturbing. So we're just going to continue this on. I definitely enjoy a lot of the films that I'm going to mention here, just as much as I enjoyed the ones before. Now, I am going to open this up again just so that everybody understands. Every film that I'm adding to these lists, it's not in a particular order here. I'm not saying that just because I put one at number 1 that it's the all-time best. It's just simply where I decide to put them in this 5 films. I don't think that there's really any measurement that I can put on these movies that's going to satisfy people. If I say one film is the ultimate most disturbing film of all time, you're just going to say, no, that's not it. And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinions. These are just mine. But going forward, after we get a few more lists deep, I would be interested in maybe coming back and doing some sort of a tier list. Maybe we can kind of set the record straight on where we put these eventually, once we accumulate more films, obviously. So whether it's disturbing films, brutal films, or just straight gross, icky stuff, I'm here to talk about it, and I'm glad you're here with me. So with all that said, of course, you know I gotta do it. It's part of the rules of YouTube. If you are new to the channel and you're just discovering us, hi, thank you for being here. I appreciate you watching my goofy little videos, and I hope that I'll be entertaining enough or our opinions will align enough that you will grace me with a subscribe, a like, and maybe share this with your friends who also love brutal horror. Now that all that's out of the way, let's get into the list. Kicking things off at number 5, we have 2006's The Hills Have Eyes. A traveling family falls victim to a group of mutated cannibals in a desert far away from civilization. Although I can't remember exactly what DVD it was, I will always remember seeing the trailer for this film in front of a movie that I clearly used to watch a ton, because I've seen this trailer a million times, and boy howdy, as a kid, I thought this was like the pinnacle of intense, brutal, and scary horror. Just seeing this preview, seeing what they were teasing at us, and reading all those little quotes that come across the trailer, I was just so enthralled, so disturbed. I could not wait until I, grew the balls enough to be like, I'm gonna watch this. And when I finally did sit down to watch this, I was much older. I had actually already seen the 1977 Wes Craven classic and really enjoyed it. So I went into this a bit more pessimistic than I think you'd imagine. But I gotta say, this is a movie that absolutely won my heart. And yeah, there are some taboo topics in here. If you know me and you know the channel at all, I'm not the biggest fan of essay, especially in film. It just kind of sucks the fun out of horror for me, because it just really crosses a lot of lines, and I don't really like watching that stuff. But This film had a little bit of that in there, so I'll give you that warning. But I think that the movie around this is so striking and just so enthralling and so intense that I can kind of let that slide a little bit easier than I would with certain other films. I think this movie is an excellent remake. I would put this up there with one of the best horror remakes in the modern era. I mean, Alexander Aja has gone on to have a wonderful career with remaking things like Piranha 3D, which I absolutely have a blast with, and most recently his films like Crawl and the upcoming Crawl 2. I love Crawl, and I think it's such a blast of a film. We don't get movies like that anymore, and you can clearly see the DNA of this guy all the way back here in 2006 with just what he's able to bring. There is a specific kind of tinge to this movie that makes it strike on all these different levels of brutality for me. It's not just the blood and guts and everything that kind of goes along with mutants attacking a family in a desert, but it's the elements themselves and just how they portray the area. I think that one of the elements that really strikes me every time I sit down to watch this movie is just how hot everything is, and just how that has to be adding an extra level of uncomfortability to this whole scenario, this whole fucked up, terrible scenario that this family has found themselves in. And yeah, I mean, it's no secret this film was made in Morocco in 120 degree heat, so that shines through perfectly. When the actors are suffering in the heat, they're really suffering. And it's definitely adds to that extra kind of oomph that you get from just how awful and disturbing and brutal this film really is, because once you get down to the bloody bits, this movie really goes to some pretty dark places. Now, mind you, some of you are going to say, this film isn't intense enough, and it doesn't do nearly enough to satiate what you're looking for out of a brutal horror film, but don't discount 2006's Hills Have Eyes, because there's a couple of kills in here specifically to do with the father of the group, who is strung up in the middle of the night and lit on fire, and he has to burn to death as his family watches. On top of that, yes, the essay scene, it's absolutely grotesque, and it's horrific. And then when you get to our pseudo main character here, I don't necessarily know if you'd call him the main character, but Doug, when he goes to try to find his daughter, his little baby girl, and he gets into that town, that little village of all these mutants, and you just see the carnage that these people have been put through with all of the testing and everything that's gone on and all their fucked up bloodline has produced. It's harrowing, it's grotesque, and I fucking adore it. I think that this movie is awesome. I highly recommend, if you've never sat down to check out 2006's The Hills Have Eyes, you should definitely do yourself a favor and watch it, because if you're looking for something that's brutal, but also very well shot, very well produced, and overall just an intense thrill ride, this is definitely one of those movies that's going to satisfy all of those points. Coming in at number 4, a brutal horror movies list, especially a continuation, would not be complete without a twisted, maniacal clown making an appearance. And of course, I'm discussing 2007's 100 Tears. Two journalists are on the trail of a demented serial killer who may be much closer than they think. Alright folks, I'm gonna level with you here. I'm full transparency. I didn't know jack shit about this movie until like a week ago, when I was doing some extra research, just trying to put together a top tier list, seeing if there's something that I haven't seen that I need to watch or that I need to rewatch, just to make sure that I'm covering all of my bases. I had never heard of 100 Tears, so when I kind of start going through, looking at some other folks' lists, looking at some of these articles talking about brutal horror, and just kind of what's out there that I may not know about, this was surprisingly a stone that I have left unturned. And yeah, 100 Tears is kind of a dog shit movie. I'm not gonna lie to you, this movie ain't great. But where this movie succeeds is definitely in the gore department. This movie's nothing impressive. This is shot on what I think is just standard definition, if not VHS quality cameras. And it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, the two journalists show up. They're looking for a serial killer named Gertie the Clown. And yeah, he's got an oversized machete. And he is just laying waste to motherfuckers left, right, and center. And again, it's garbage. It's really just schlock. This is not something that I'm going to recommend to everybody who watches this list, but I am going to recommend it to gorehounds, people who love brutal horror films that are absolutely steeped in the bloody stuff, the gutsy stuff, and this has all of that. And I will say, the gore that is on display in this film is the most entertaining piece because it's really well done. It's fucked up. There's some twisted shit. There's a lot of really kind of impressive kills that they pull off. Yes, there's a couple that look a little cheaper here, but I kind of dug what they were doing, and I could see maybe where they were trying to go with this, but they stopped after this one. They didn't continue it from what I know. I've done very minimal research on this afterwards. I had to watch this thing for free on YouTube and just kind of decide whether or not I wanted to talk about it. And, you know, this is kind of like a precursor to Terrifier. I know we've had a lot of killer clown films, but this is certainly the closest one that we get to Art and his madness as time goes on. And, you know, again, it's not a great movie. It's not something that I'm going to recommend to everybody. But if you are looking for a particular kind of trash film that absolutely covers the bases when it comes to gore and really kind of just is a really interesting think piece, really, because you're just kind of watching this and you're like, what was the intent here? What was their plan? How did this come to be? 100 Tears can be kind of entertaining. Again, it's schlock. It's something that I'm not going to say is up there with some of the greats, but it's a movie that I just discovered and I felt like I needed to share it. So if you like fucked up clown movies, you want to see somebody with an oversized cleaver, hacking people to death, being just a ditzy little clown, there you go. 100 Tears might be your bag. Stepping away from the brutality of all of these gory films, I just want to talk about a little bit of romance. And yeah, there's nothing sweeter than taking kind of a memorable vacation with someone that you love and you just want to spend some quality time together and just get away from town, get away from work. And that's where our number 3 pick comes in with 2008's Eden Lake. When a couple goes to a remote lake for a romantic getaway, their quiet weekend is shattered by an aggressive group of kids. Rowdiness quickly turns to rage as the teens terrorize them, and a weekend outing becomes a battle for survival. For those of you who have seen Eden Lake, you know I was kind of pulling your leg there at the start. Yes, that may be the setup for the film, but this movie goes to some very dark places with a very unique antagonist, and that comes to a group of kids, kind of led by one specific individual who's kind of, I guess, the head figure of these kids, this group. And these kids are just twisted. They're messed up. They're backwoods, and yeah, they get really, really frustrated at our two leads here for reasons that I will leave up to you to discover. But yeah, I saw this movie years ago. I don't know necessarily what intrigued me about it other than just kind of, I think, the cast, because I knew who Michael Fassbender was. I was a big fan. This was actually the first thing that I saw Kelly Riley in before she was on Yellowstone. And yeah, this was a movie that just caught my attention. And I just remember watching this for the first time and thinking, holy shit, that is gruesome. That is messed up. And this is definitely very original. And yeah, it's still something I love to go back and visit. It's definitely one of those brutal horror films that kind of has that quality stamp on it that I say that I'm always looking for when it comes to brutal horror. This is not something that's just going to be shocking for shock's sake like 100 Tears. This has a message, and they do an excellent job of delivering it. This is a really excellent balance between brutal, uncomfortable, and just intense, gory sequences, and also very, very intricate and unique storytelling. I love the battle for survival here. I think the performances are excellent. And again, I think that the director, James Watkins, here really set himself up as a force when it comes to these kind of horror thrillers. He'll later go on to do this most recent iteration of Speak No Evil that just came out, depending on when you're watching this video. And yeah, that movie, although I wasn't like super thrilled to go see it at first, I gotta say it won me over. Now, it's no Eden Lake, but you can definitely see the influence there. So I genuinely think this movie is one of the best brutal horror films out there. I love it a lot. I think that it absolutely delivers again on its concept. And when it comes down to it, there's just not a lot of movies where you're talking about kids, teenagers, preteens, all kind of being coaxed by one particular kid to do some very heinous things to innocent people. And yeah, it's not just the adults that are kind of, on the chopping block here. It's not like a Children of the Corn situation. No, it's absolutely these kids too, because if you go against any of them, there's one kid in particular named Adam, who at one point, he kind of steps to our lead here of Brett. That's a big fucking mistake, my boy. And those of you who have seen the film, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It is not great, and poor guy, it's awful. And just the way this movie ends, you think it's going one way, and it completely subverts its expectation, but not in a way that's like cheap or cheesy. It's really, really dark, and yeah, it's honestly one of those things that really sticks with you after watching this. So if you have not seen Eden Lake, I highly recommend it. It's definitely, again, one of those brutal horror films that is going to stick with you long after the credits roll. If you didn't like my little clown joke that I made with 100 tears, don't worry, because coming in at number 2, we have 2022's Terrifier 2. Lots of 2s there. After being resurrected by a sinister entity, Art the Clown returns to the timid town of Miles County, where he targets a teen girl and her younger brother on Halloween night. The Terrifier films are something we have covered extensively on this channel, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this because I feel like there's tons of videos on here where I'm going over this. In fact, there's a video I did early this past year where I broke down the infamous bedroom scene from this film and just kind of talked about how they made it. So I'm going to leave a link for that right here on screen. If you would like to check that out and get some behind the scenes details on it, absolutely go for it. But yeah, Terrifier 2, if you don't know, is quickly become one of my favorite slasher films. Absolutely love Art the Clown, absolutely love this franchise, and I came into it as someone who didn't like the first Terrifier. So when 2 won me over, it completely changed the way that I look at this character, that I look at this director, and yeah, it's gone on to create an amazing third film that I absolutely adored, as well as we're hopefully, I think the word around the campfire right now is we're definitely getting a 4, maybe a 5, but to kind of stick with Terrifier 2, where this film succeeds, honestly, is in excess. It's a long film at 2 hours and 18 minutes, and it's a very gory film. It goes to places with its gore and its shock that you don't see in many brutal horror flicks. I mean, again, the bedroom scene is absolutely the showstopper. It's probably the most intense kill in the entire franchise thus far. And I gotta say that there are still really good kills throughout the rest of this movie. I mean, this thing opens right after where the first one takes place, and this poor coroner just has got his eye stabbed out. He gets his throat slashed, blood going all over the place. I mean, Jesus Christ, the two main leads when it comes to Sienna and her brother Jonathan, their mother gets her face blown in by a double-barrel shotgun. And yeah, this is a movie that, if you haven't heard, does not shy away from the violence. So I don't know a single soul out here who doesn't know about Terrifier 2 and knows about its history at this point. But if you are one of the very few who don't know about it, definitely give this thing a watch. I dare I say you should watch this one before you see Terrifier, just so that way you know what the full product looks like, and then go back and experience that one. Because yeah, this is a film that absolutely, again, won me over. I love talking about it. I love dissecting it. It made me a fan of not only Art the Clown, but really got me back on board and back into the interest of gore films for gore hounds. So definitely mad props to Terrifier 2, and that is why it makes my number 2 spot. And here we are back again, folks. We are at my number 1 pick. Yes, this is definitely a list that I had a lot of fun assembling, and I knew when I put the first one out, hell, I knew when I put my last list about disturbing films that, are more disturbing than Terrifier 3, I'd be getting a lot of requests for this. And yes, I heard you. I just don't want to pull out the big guns so quickly, guys. You gotta understand, there's a million brutal horror movies lists on here. I didn't know that this would be what you guys like, so of course there's movies that are gonna be more intense than some of the ones I list. And yeah, I know the one you guys all want me to say, the one you all want me to talk about, and I believe me, it's a film that I've seen and I love. And of course, I'm talking about 2016's Martyrs. Yes, the remake to that terrible French film. I'm kidding. 2008's Martyrs. A young woman's quest for revenge against the people who kidnapped and tormented her as a child leads her and her friend, who is also a victim of child abuse, on a terrifying journey into the living hell of depravity. As I teed up for you there in that little intro into number 1, yes, this is a film that It's absolutely one of the top 3 probably most intense, graphic, and just overall brutal films out there. There are multiple sequences that we're going to dive into on why that is. But overall, I gotta say, when it comes to films that can balance brutality, especially a film like this that has such overwhelming brutality and story, this is definitely one of the best. I saw Martyrs many years ago. It was recommended to me by a customer who came into a used media store. He brought me a stack of movies, and it was one of them. I watched it, and yeah, just like all of you who have seen it, and those of you who haven't, when you watch this film, it's absolutely polarizing the first time. And it's polarizing, honestly, every time you watch it. It's something that is going to stick with you because, yeah, it lives up to that reputation of being brutal, being grotesque. But what the film ultimately climaxes to and what it comes to, the messages that it's putting out there, they're very interesting. They're very psychological, and they're very much something I did not expect, especially as you're watching this and you're kind of thinking, oh man, this is definitely just a splatter film. This is definitely just here to basically showcase gore. But I love the way that they structure this movie because it opens up with something that kind of leaves you with a mystery, and then we move past that to a very shocking midsection that then has these just horrific reveals towards the end of the second act, and a third act that absolutely lives up to its namesake with this being just the most brutal horror film there is. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's number 1. I don't know what I would put at number 1, but certainly for this list, it has to be a top contender. It has to be on a high point because it lives up to it. I mean, the final sequence alone and what they do to one of our characters here, it's downright deplorable. It's downright going to just ruin you. It emotionally, because not only do you care about this character, like I say, is the most important piece to a brutal horror movie, is you gotta give a shit about the people the bad stuff's happening to, but you really give a shit about this person. And then what happens is it's shocking and it's amazing and it holds up so well. I mean, this is still something that's like for 2008. I know it's not like we're talking about it being something, a very minuscule budget back in the 60s or anything, but this absolutely holds up in the effects department. They're so gross, so detailed. And yeah, again, that ending, it leaves you wondering just what in the world are they going for and what in the world happened. And that's all I can say without spoiling it, because once you get it, it's not like it's something that's going to be like, oh, I don't understand it. You get it, but you want to know what they see, and that's all I can say. Martyrs definitely is one of the most gruesome films out there. It's one of the most brutal films out there, but it's also, in my humble opinion, one of the most well done, well executed horror films there is. I love it. I think that it's something that absolutely deserves your attention at least once if you are into these kind of movies. If you are not, then maybe you have to skip this one. But I'm telling you, this is certainly one of those films that deserves your attention. It's not just here to shock you. It's not just here to pull your leg. Certainly there are those moments, but it also really pays off in the story and the characters and just the way that they twist and turn this entire event and what happens. It's very good. I really, really appreciate the filmmaking here, and on all aspects, I think Martyrs is certainly one of the best, most brutal horror films. There you have it, guys. That is the end of part 2 for the most brutal horror films you need to watch. Yeah, I'm still having a lot of fun with this. I think that I am trying my best not to just play the hits, of course, with me kind of going for some more obscure ones in the first part. I figured I'd have to put in a couple of the classics like Martyrs and some of the new big boys like Terrifier 2 in there. But I think that it's still a nice widespread of just different films. Again, 100 Tears is something that I just exposed myself to. And yeah, it's fucking living up to that gory, brutal standard. Even though it ain't the best movie. So I definitely want to keep these lists diverse. So even if we move into part 3 and, I just go back to some more obscure ones, I think that's kind of the fun of this. So, just because I don't talk about like a Serbian film and Salo and everything and saying they're the all-time most intense and brutal horror films there are, doesn't mean that they won't pop up on another list later. I just want to, again, talk about films that aren't just brutal for brutal's sake. I'll get there, just like I did here, and put a few in. But I want to talk about films that have a purpose, like Martyrs, like Bone Tomahawk, that draw me in for more than just the brutality. But yeah, guys, that's going to wrap it up here. Again, if you're new to the channel and you've made it this far, thank you for watching the video. I'll hope you'll hit that subscribe button and that like button and give this a share. So, yeah, that'll wrap it up for me. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell, and remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.